Good morning and welcome to today's Ordinary Council meeting of the 16th of September 2021. It is 9 o'clock and this meeting is being held in Council Chambers. I will mark attendance and I can see everyone is in attendance. Good morning to everyone. So I'll now ask Councillor Kunzelman to do an acknowledgement of country.
Ipswich City Council acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered, acknowledging our gratitude that we share this land today, but also acknowledging the cost of that sharing and our hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together, and we welcome opportunities for further engagement.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll ask Councillor Doyle to lead us into prayer this morning.
Heavenly Father, we seek you to be with us in this meeting today. Assist us to be an example to others, bringing strength and encouragement in whatever we do, and equip us for the ongoing challenges as they arise. Give the guidance to continue to make wise decisions for both the short and long-term benefit of our city and our community, regardless however difficult and unpopular some will be. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. We'll now move on to apologies and leave of absence, and I have none, but I open up to the floor for any leave of absence. There being none, I'll move on to item 5, which are the condolences, and I have none. Item 6, the tributes, and there are none. 7, presentation of petitions, and there are none. 8, presentations and deputations, there are none. So we'll move on now to number 9, which is public participation. And I understand that Mr Gary Duffy is asked to address the council, and I'll ask for Mr Duffy to come through the doors there and stand at the lectern. Thank you, Mr Duffy, and letting you know that you can take off your mask for making a speech. Thank you for participating in public participation in our council, and you have a total of up to 15 minutes to address council.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity that has been given by the council to the residents of Ipswich to address council. It's a unique opportunity that I think is pretty unique throughout Queensland. Many people complain about councils, and I'm no exception. But it is a part of my position as a committee member on the QLGRA that we represent members of the community who have local government issues. I travel all over the state and meet with and assist people with concerns regarding their council. What I can say is that after spending the last almost 2 years being involved in the Planning Environment Court side by side with the Ipswich City Council, this new Ipswich Council has done and is doing the very best for intergenerational equity, and also in regards to the precautionary principle. And this is showing in their stance for the rights of the citizens and in their policy framework. For this, I give this council an A+. Intergenerational equity is that as a generation we do not leave a burden on the future generations, and that we ensure that future generations are not disadvantaged by the actions we as a community in a local government area or any area take. The precautionary principle, at the opening of each session of an Australian government, they say, I declare open this day's hearings and acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet, and elders past, present and emerging, whose lands, winds and waters we now share. Whose lands, winds and waters we now share is the most important foundation of precautionary principle, because not only do we share them in our lifetime, but we share them for all future generations. And unless we protect them, then the lands, winds and waters will not be fit for habitat. The precautionary principle is a guideline in environmental decision making, which has 4 central components: taking preventive action in the face of uncertainty, shifting the burden of proof to the proponents of an activity. That means making the owners of that activity prove their principles, exploring the wide range of alternatives and possibly harmful actions, and increasing public participation in decision-making. And that is something that this council is strived to achieve. The new Ipswich Council are showing the way for many councils, and that is that they will protect the lands, waters and winds in this area, and the community has given it its full support when it comes to ensuring the quality of life of its residents and environment are protected. I would like to thank the council for standing up for the rights of the community, for the rights of future generations and the shared equity we all have with the elders past, present and emerging. Many in Ipswich do not know that at Newchum and in other Ipswich sites there was the discovery of the world's oldest known dinosaur footprints in coal mines. Consequently, footprints in the Ipswich coal measures may constitute the entire fossil record of the Jurassic dinosaurs in Australia, and according to Tony Thorburn from the Department of Zoology, Queensland University, in a paper published in 1996, the Queensland Government, along with the previous councils, turned these sites into toxic garbage dumps. In the Planning Environment Court, we saw the Queensland Government, represented by the Chief Executive, siding with the dump companies. In other words, not only was the council fighting against the toxic dump companies, we, the residents of Ipswich, were fighting the state government. Ipswich sits in an area known as the Clarence Morton Basin, on which the Clarence Morton bioregion sits. This spans an area of about 24,000 square kilometres from the Lockyer Valley down to Grafton, New South Wales. This basin provides all the groundwater and drinking water for more than 1 million people. Some of the major flood-growing areas of Australia who supply food-growing areas of Australia who supply all our local supermarkets. So it's clear that the policy this council is making are in line with the Australian Government Environment Guidelines, but is also taking in consideration what happens outside the boundaries of the Ipswich LGA. In the future, gone are the days when we only thought of ourselves. We have to consider the impact of our decisions on those in the areas where we cannot pollute air we breathe, the soil we grow our plants in, and we must consider our intergenerational equity. The Queensland Government has at last appointed a Rehabilitation Commissioner. That's taken nearly 12 months. Mr. James Patel. Mr. Patel was previously appointed as the Director General, Department of Natural Resources and Mines in July 2015, Director General, Natural Resources, Mines and Energy in 2017. And prior to his appointment, James was the Director General of the Department of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Partnerships, in a position he held since 2013. He has significant private and public sector experience, a scientist, a business administrator, a professional, and he brings more than 30 years of experience to this role. In his new role, he has ensured that all Queensland mine sites have a progressive rehabilitation plan and that they comply with all the regulations relating to their permits. Giant toxic sewage pits holding millions of litres of toxic water, which will, without doubt, end up in the Clarence Morton Basin system, affecting every community existing within that basin for eternity, especially in Ipswich, where every site is located below the groundwater table, which is prohibited in other states, will no doubt be a thing of the past. The new Ipswich Council has to be congratulated for its policies, and I really do sincerely congratulate you. This council has stood up for conflicting pressures from those who seek to restrain economic growth and environment protection for the sake of profits and power. Public participation in decision-making has been shunned by previous governments and councils, but this new council has given the public open, transparent options to participate, as with me being able to present here today. And just a few weeks ago with the public presentations to the committee regarding another application before council. While maintaining their objectivity and focus on understanding the world, local government should be aware of the policy uses of their work and their social responsibility to adhere to the precautionary principles protecting human health and environment when announcing and creating policies. I and many others congratulate Mayor Harting and this council for being brave enough to stand up for the residents, running a transparent council, one that invites engagement of the community. I congratulate you, Mayor, councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. I'll just stop my timer. I'd like to move to note this matter and to take no further action. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. Any discussion? No, I'll move the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr Duffy, for participating. We now move to item 10, which is declarations of interest on the matters on the agenda. And I understand we have declarations of interest from Councillor Fechner and Councillor Madsen. So, Councillor Fechner?
Thank you, Mayor. In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act of 2009, I, Councillor Andrew Fechner, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item number 14.6, entitled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee's Report. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is my business interests in both A1A Proprietary Limited and Bar Heisenberg Proprietary Limited, both located in the top of town. I propose, by dealing with this conflict, to leave the room while the matter is discussed and voted on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fechner. Councillor Madsen?
Thank you, Mayor. In accordance with Section 150 EQ of the Local Government Act 2009, I, Councillor Jacob Madsen, inform the meeting that I have a declarable conflict of interest in item 14.6, titled Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee Meeting Report. The nature of the declarable conflict of interest is I'm on the executive of the Ipswich Trades Hall and Labour Day Committee, which manages the Ipswich Trades Hall, which is, of course, immediately adjacent to the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Project. As a result of my conflict of interest, I will leave the meeting room while the matter is considered and voted on.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madsen. Are there any other declarations of interest? No? Thank you. Then I'll move on to item 11, which is the confirmation of the minutes. So it's the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting. So I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of August 2021 be confirmed. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Any discussion on those minutes? No? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. We move on to item 12, which is the mayoral minute, and there is none this month. 13 is business outstanding, and there is none. So we'll go on to item 14, which is the reception and consideration of our committee reports. The first one is 14.1, the Growth and Infrastructure and Waste Committee, noting that that committee has full delegations. So the recommendation here is that the minutes here be noted from our 2nd of September meeting. So I will move that as the chair. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Fechner, thank you very much. Any discussion on that report? No? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. I'll now move on to item 14.2, the Governance and Transparency Committee, and that recommendation is that Council adopt the recommendations of the Governance and Transparency Committee number 8 of 2021 that was held on the 2nd of September 2021. I'll hand over to the Chair, Councillor Madsen, if you'd like to, maybe he should move it instead of myself, and if you would like to highlight anything of those reports.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd recommend that we adopt the recommendation as is. The main couple of items would have been the new trustee lease for the Rosewoods RSL sub-branch, which everybody thought was a pretty good outcome for the community. And we had a major procurement matter for the supply and maintenance of multifunction device printers worth $1.8 million over 3 years. We had an update on the iVolve project that we get quarterly. And we had some changes to the councillor briefing sessions and workshops policy.
Thank you. So will you move that items 1 to 5 are moved together in
That's
batch?
correct.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. Any discussion on any of those matters? No? I'll put the matters to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. I'll now move on to item 14.3, which is the report on the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee. I'll hand over to the chair of that to see if you'd like to move that report and highlight anything of those 7 reports.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that Council adopt the recommendations of the Community Culture, Arts and Sports Committee number 8 for 2021. Just noting that our committee continues to see the success of the organisation delivering on the community development strategy, particularly exciting that we're partnering with groups in the community to deliver our Safer Seniors program, which is 8 workshops targeted at our senior community to enhance a sense of empowerment, very important. Get Ready Community Safety and Crime Prevention Expo, another externally produced expo, but partnering with council, which really speaks to one of the pillars of community development, which is partnering with these groups rather than delivering on their behalf. So continuing to build capacity, which is great. Other items of note were the reconfiguration and allocation of more monies to deliver our Christmas carols for 2021, and the event sponsorship for the New Year's Eve as well. But my recommendation, as I stated, is that we accept the recommendations of the committee.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll open up for any discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Now move on to item 14.4, which is the Economic and Industry Development Committee, and I'll hand over to the chair of that committee if they would like to move that motion.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just like to move to accept the recommendations of the committee for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Johnick. Sorry, Councillor Doyle. Okay. Any discussion on those 3 matters? No, I think it's just great to see that our partnerships with the 2 chambers is continuing, going from strength to strength. Well done. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Now move on to item 14.5, the Environment and Sustainability Committee. I'll hand over to the chair of that committee to move that recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the report in batch excluding item 2, Traditional Owner Reference Group.
So you'd like to move items 1 and then 3 through to 9?
Correct.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll leave it to you to speak to those
Thank you, Mayor.
items.
The one item in particular that would stand out is item 4, which is the Natural Environment Policy. That is a new policy that Council has developed with implications right across all other areas of Council. The development of that has been a result of very good and detailed work by Council managers and officers in developing that. And I'd like to congratulate them for their work.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to any of the items 1 and 3 through to 9? No? I'll put those to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. And Councillor Lee, I assume that you're wanting to put item 2. Would you like to move item 2?
Item 2, yes, Mayor. With respect to the report, recently, this week, the Council met with Yugger and Yurugapul people here in this place to engage in further engagement and discussion with regards to the formation of the Traditional Owner Reference Group. Some of those discussions will be further ongoing. I do thank all representatives who attended and the spirit in which those discussions were undertaken. There are further outcomes that need to be achieved before I believe that the reference group will be able to be formed and the work of that group to be carried out. So with due respect to all parties, I believe that we should lay this matter on the table pending further outcomes.
Okay. I'll leave that open for discussion.
Yep, I support laying this on the table. I think that the conversations that we had with regards to native title this week were enlightening, but it also highlighted that we've got a lot of work to do to the continued understanding of the formation of these groups in council. So I welcome putting this on the table in the spirit of keeping an open mind and wanting to understand this a little bit better before we move forward.
Okay. So I think, Councillor Milligan, that you're the mover. Should we make that, adjust that to endorse, well, rather than endorse, but lay this matter on the table for 2 months? So it'll come back to us in November?
For 2 months,
The CEO
Mayor, yeah, to give it a time-bound reference, yes.
Is that what you like?
Yes, I'll amend my
I'll just
motion
check
to
with
that.
the seconder. You're okay? You're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I'll. Then the table for 2 months. So it'll come back to us in November ordinary. I'll open it up to the floor. Yes, Councillor Tully.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wonder, given the fact, and I think what the chairman's saying, or the chair is saying, is that it may be subject to further discussion and possible change, whether or not it'd be more appropriate to refer it back to the committee so that we as the other councillors can have the benefit of discussion or changes with a final recommendation. Otherwise, it just starts here without the benefit of that consideration by the committee. So if the mover and seconder were inclined to agree to that, I'd suggest that it be referred back to the committee for further consideration and report to council.
Okay. I'll just check with Councillor Milligan. Would you be okay to adjust that particular motion that it be submitted rather than to the November ordinary count, but also back to the Environment Sustainability Committee?
Yes, Mayor, I thank Councillor Tully for his advice. That may be a better process for the organisation to take.
Yes.
That way officers can further do the further work involved, and then once it's complete and is once again recommended by committee, then it can come to ordinary for...
Okay. Councillor Kunzelmann, are you comfortable?
Councillor Tully for that advice.
Yes. It'll also probably give us a chance to discuss. I know, Councillor Tully, you didn't attend that meeting with the YUP people during the week as well, so it'll be an opportunity for, I guess, a more fulsome discussion. So the matter on the table at the moment, on the recommendation at the moment, is that the matter be laid on the table for 2 months for a report to be submitted back to the November Environment Sustainability Committee pending further outcomes. Is there any other discussion on the matter? No? In that case, I'll put the matter to the floor. Those in favour, please raise your...
Sorry, Mayor, my
Please do,
apologies. I believe that what Councillor Tully was actually suggesting was that rather than the matter be laid on the table for 2 months, that it be referred back to the...
Yes, actually.
So
okay.
sorry,
My apologies.
if we could just ask the committee clerk just to remove the reference to laying it on the table, it would be fine.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Perpetual loop.
So the motion is that the matter be referred back to the November Environment and Sustainability Committee pending further outcomes. I'm just double checking with the... So rather refer back, be referred to, just take the word back.
Yes.
The matter be referred to the November Environment and Sustainability Committee.
I believe, Mayor, it needs to go back to the branch for any amendments.
Well, that will be...
And then,
that'll
then
be
when
part of the process
the
before it
report
comes to us.
is ready,
That's-
then it would come to Environment Sustainability Committee.
Yes, that will be the internal process before it comes to us. Yeah.
So rather than the matter be referred to the November Environment Sustainability
If I could just
Committee,
hand over to the acting CEO.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Councillor Milligan, Chair of the committee, it will be fine to be worded as it is. In the process of referring it back to the committee, officers will need to reconsider and submit a revised report. And perhaps if I could just suggest the committee clerk just add to the end there for further consideration, perhaps.
Thank you,
That would be
Acting
okay.
CEO. Councillor Milligan, your views on that the matter be referred to the November Environment and Sustainability Committee for further consideration as the original mover. Are you okay with that amendment?
Yes, I am, Mayor.
Yes. Councillor Kunzelman?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll now open that motion up, as moved by Councillor Tully, for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. We now move on to item 14.6, which is the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee. I'll hand over to the chair of that committee, Councillor Doyle, if you'd like to move a recommendation. Oh, sorry, I apologise. I'll wait for Councillor Fickner and Councillor Madsen to leave. Thank you. Councillor Doyle, I'll hand over to you to move that motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I move that Council adopt the recommendations of the Ipswich Central Redevelopment Committee of the 2nd of September 2021, items 1 to 5 in batch.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Jonick. I'll leave that open for any discussion.
My only comment, Mayor, it was a fantastic day when part of that committee, we were approving the very first agreement for lease for our Eats building within Nicholas Street precinct. So with many more to follow. Thank you.
It's terrific news, and I can see with school holidays coming up next week, we've got Spider-Man and Iron Man coming to the mall as well, to the precinct next week, which will be
As
great.
well as the Halloween movie night coming up.
That's right. Thank you. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. So, Councillor Kunzman, did you have your hand up? Yes, thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. I'll wait for Councillor Fickner and Councillor Madsen to come back in before I continue. Thank you. We now move on to item 15. So 15.1 is the CEO's organisational performance report for August. So I will move that. Do I have a seconder for that report? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. And as part of discussion, I'll ask a few questions. Acting CEO, would you like to provide some of the highlights of that report?
Thank you, Mayor, Chair. To highlight that in line with the current annual plan for 2021-22 and the range of projects and initiatives and deliverables, pleased to highlight that with the Transparency and Integrity Hub, as the report indicates, we have 2 new stories and sets of data that have been included on the hub in the forward procurement schedule and in the tea tree bioenergy payments, the second being in line with the resolution of the council last year. So very pleased with that progress, and there are more stories in the pipeline going forward. We highlight the Ipswich SES depot upgrade completion with the funding received from the state government and contribution by council as well. And we also highlight the progress in 2 further important projects in the annual plan, being the customer experience strategy, with that draft strategy workshopped with councillors during the month of August and set to come forward for your consideration next month, and the people and culture strategy, a very important strategy on your agenda here today. Concerning, work health, safety and wellbeing, as I highlighted last month, that we have had a further 3 lost time injuries. However, we have further ramped up full court press action in relation to our health, safety and wellbeing, and I'm hoping to bring better news for the month of September in terms of our performance. The last point I would highlight is in relation to the capital delivery program, which is there in the report, that very pleasingly we're in fact ahead of the projected budget for the month of August, not because we're expending more than we should or running over budget, but rather that the program is performing so well that we're actually ahead of where we expected to be. So that's fantastic turnaround in performance, we believe, from our Infrastructure and Environment Department, and particularly the capital delivery team. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Acting CEO. I'll open the floor up for any discussion. And I'd just like to commend you on the Capital Works program progressing well. It's obviously a core task for council to make sure that we do make sure our roads and parks and our infrastructure and our drainage and everything is completed and done.
Could I quickly pass that on to the team, Mayor, if I may, through you? They're certainly delighted and very encouraged and heartened and motivated by the progress that they're being able to deliver for the community.
We've had a number of workshops, I guess, as council on the customer experience strategy. This is another core deliverable for us as a council to improve that customer service experience, making sure that it's throughout the entire organisation. So I look forward to it coming to council, and I guess we'll discuss the people and culture strategy later on today at this meeting. Is there any other discussion?
Just a question for the CEO, if I may. With regards to the action report that is given to us each month with regards to resolutions either in progress or actioned, the owner of that document, is it you or is it the respective department listed in the report in terms of actioning those items that are in progress? Particularly interested as, and I won't list them here, but you know, there are some outstanding from over a year ago in progress, and it might be nice to have, as well as the status there as in progress, maybe a potential date for resolution in the future, just so that we know where we're going and you know when there might be a perceived outcome for some of these things that are still in progress. Some of them I note are in relation to notices of motions, plural, raised by fellow councillors, so maybe following up on those as well. So just, sorry, back to the question that where it specifically says that the Department of, for instance, Environment and Infrastructure are dealing with a particular item in progress, is it that particular department and that GM that's responsible for that line item?
Thank you. Through the Chair, ultimately I'm accountable for everything, as you're aware, Councillor Fechner. However, yeah, certainly rely upon the GMs of the respective departments. Those actions would sit with them in our Info Council system to monitor on a regular basis, and certainly in preparation and during the course of the last month, as you can see, we did close a good number of outstanding resolutions. However, that will remain a priority and a focus going forward. With some of them, you would note that they have been outstanding for some time and typically tend to relate, not always, but to leasing matters, which can actually take some time for us to progress through to full resolution. But to your question, can we include a target date completion? I believe that that functionality certainly does exist in the system, and we can certainly look to provide some further detail to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess while we're on that too, Acting CEO, I noticed that there's a number of probably about half the items that I see in progress, I know that they're actually completed, so may I ask for you to review that? Things like condolence motions and other things which obviously clearly been done months ago are still marked as in progress. So if the General Manager and yourself could review that and update, that'd be great. Thank you. Any other discussion? No, in that case, I'll put this report forward. For the vote, those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We'll now move on to the monthly finance performance report. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please?
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Jeff Keach, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you. Thank you, CFO. Is there anything in particular you'd like to highlight to us of concern or risk?
Sure.
Or a certain key achievement?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I guess just in a general summary, the results are slightly ahead of target and probably reflect the trend that I would normally expect to see at this sort of time of the financial year. You do get some level of timing differences in relation to budgets and actuals. The positive is that, yes, revenue is slightly ahead of budget and expenses are slightly behind, so there's some positive in that space. And already, as been highlighted in the Acting CEO report, the delivery of the capital program from the IED side of things has been ahead of target. We are slightly behind in terms of the schedule for the CBD, and you'll note my comments in relation to looking at the phasing in relation to the Yeats building and the Metro B, but I know you're fairly familiar with that as well. The only item that I've highlighted probably in the risk factor, which again you're aware of, is this month we've received additional legal costs associated with the waste planning appeals. That's sort of a matter which is waiting for the final invoices to come through. We have spent about $5.9 million year to date on that, to date on those appeals, not year to date, in total, and obviously just now waiting on the final invoices, which we expect to see over the next couple of weeks to see where that ends up from there. So I've raised that as obviously a risk item that we'll need to consider and see where that ends up during the financial year.
Thank you, Mr Keach. I had this noted to ask you about that. Obviously, at a previous council, I think we approved for up to 6.6 million plus 10% contingency, which
I think it was about 20% contingency in there, so about an extra 1.2. So yeah, 6.4 was the approval of the previous council. The discussion I've had with legal is we expect it to be around that number, but obviously we'll just need to wait until we see the final invoices to be able to inform you fully of that, and we expect to see that over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Any other questions of the CFO? No, thank you, Mr Keach.
Thank you.
I move that the report on Council's financial performance for the period ending the 31st of August be submitted and be considered and noted by Council. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. I open it for any discussion and debate. There being none, I'll move the matter for the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Move on to item 15.3. May I have the relevant council officer come to the lectern, please? May I please state your name and your title, please?
Talia Lovelanay, Manager People and Culture.
I'm just going to check, can you hear Ms. Lovelanay? Thank you.
Better?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for this report. I think it's a big step forward for us as a council. Just noting in the risks and the risk management implications in the report, item 6 there was responsibilities and accountabilities and clarity regarding individual staff accountabilities. Do you mind expanding on that and what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with regard to the People and Culture branch, there's work to be done internally within the branch around position descriptions and being very clear who is accountable for what in the organisation, and making reference to the Good Governance Guide and being very clear in that, and across the organisation as well in terms of risk. We have taken feedback after the councillor workshop on the 3rd of August, where we discussed accountability and governance, and we've included a strategy action item to specifically cover off on that in the updated strategy. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Lovelanay. Are there any other questions? No, thank you very much. Thank you. So I move that Council endorse the People and Culture Strategy 2021 to 2026 as outlined in attachment A. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelmann. I'll open it up for discussion.
Just through you, Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Fittner.
I agree with your commentary earlier that this is a really good strategy and one that the organisation needs. I think that this is a very supportive document, obviously aspirational, but the implementation of it is important. But I think some of these key themes really nurture the organisation moving forward, and I think that's very important to us. So I'd just like to thank the team and Ms. Lovelinay for the work that they've done, putting this strategy together and bringing it to us for commentary and review, but noting that we're very happy, because if the organisation is happy, it's performing well, and we're achieving really good outcomes for our community. So thank you, Ms. Lovelinay.
Thank you, Councillor Fittner. Yes, you're only as strong as your team. So
Absolutely.
it's important for Council to have a strong team. Any other discussion? No? I put other matters to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to item 15.4, which is the provisional projects. Would anyone like to ask a question of the relevant council officer on this? No? In that case, I'll move this. I move that Council approve the provisional projects listed in this report to proceed to design and construction this financial year in accordance with the capital investment in provisional projects policy. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Milligan. I'll open it up for any discussion. Councillor Tully?
Sorry, thanks, Mayor. I see that one of the items in Division 2 is the speed awareness signs on Redbank Plains Road near Shiloh Church. And, they are significant amounts of money, but it's a community awareness and a community safety program to install these signs. I find a lot of feedback in the community, even from young children who driving with hopefully they're driving with their parents. And they comment on it. We have them positioned around the city in Division 2, places including Brisbane Terrace at Goodna, Gales, Bellbird Park, Augustin Heights. They are a powerful warning to people about speed limits in residential areas. And I see in the last week the Brisbane City Council is seeking approval from the state government to have their own detection of speeding drivers in residential streets. I know the police can do that now, obviously exclusively, but there are many residential streets that don't come to the attention of police or where the police are more prioritising major thoroughfares and roads. A lot of complaints I get are speedsters on a lot of the smaller, narrower streets in our community. So I'd hope the state government would seriously consider that across Queensland, not just for the Brisbane City Council area. And I just make the point about these signs, which do bring to drivers their awareness that they are speeding. That's not dissimilar from the other 40k signs, flashing signs around schools. And I note in the state budget, around Ipswich, there's a lot more conversions to flashing signs rather than static signs by the state government. So I think that's a dual opportunity or a triple opportunity. One, to be putting in these signs ourselves, the other ones with the state, and obviously the possibility of councils being involved in reducing speed in our residential areas.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. It reminds me, Councillor Doyle and Councillor Fittner, this week we're at the 1 Mile Neighbourhood Watch AGM, and there was a lot of discussion about these speed awareness signs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, Councillor Tully, I too am watching very closely the Brisbane City Council's submission to the state government with regard to the ability to issue infringements. Let's just wait and watch.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No? Thank you very much. I'll move this report, this recommendation. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We now move on to item 15.5, which is the report on the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the 25th of August. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer any questions? No? In that case, I move that the report of the Audit and Risk Management Committee 4 of 2021 on the 25th of August be received, the contents noted and the recommendations contained therein be adopted. Do I have a seconder? I'm probably looking at, thank you, Councillor Doyle. And I also note that Councillor Cosmo also put a hand up, both our representatives on that committee, so thank you very much. Would either of you like to speak to that, or would anyone like to hear from the CEO or the Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Mayor. I would just thought I'd take the opportunity just to make a brief comment around the role of the Audit and Risk Committee. Many members within our community probably wouldn't be aware that it exists and what its role is. And you know, highlighted at our most recent Audit and Risk Committee meeting for Councillor Kunzelman and I, just how important, not only is it a requirement under legislation, but the makeup of our current external committee involving 3 external members, leaders in their professions, in the industries within Queensland. We are very, very lucky to have them overseeing and I guess testing the robustness of our operational policies and procedures. They challenge and they test our CEO and council staff who attend that meeting, and I'm always happy to see that the feedback and constructive criticism is well received by the operations here at council, and they're very quick to, you know, adopt changes in need. So it is, you know, given where we've come from, it's just, I guess, another opportunity for an external set of eyes, keeping a close eye on things. So.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle, and thank you, Councillor Kunzelman, for your eagle eyes. You'll have to. So, do you mind turning your microphone on?
I was just endorsing the comments of Councillor Doyle.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kunzelman. Open up for any discussion? There being no discussion, put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. I know we have quite a large item coming up, so I might just call for a 10-minute adjournment, if I can. So it's now 9:48. And I ask for us to come back. I move that we come back at 9:58. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of the adjournment, please raise your hand. It's unanimous, so we'll now have an adjournment. Thank you. Thank you. We're now back in session after the 10-minute adjournment. I look around and it's just Councillor Kunzema and myself, so we don't have a quorum. So I will I'll have to extend the adjournment. I apologise for that, and we'll be back as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you. We're back. My apologies for extending the adjournment. It's now 10:02. We come now to item 15.6, which is the development application recommendation for Wanless Landfill and Waste Transfer Resource Recovery Facility at Ebenezer. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please?
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Anthony Bowles, Acting Development Planning Manager.
Thank you. Mr Bowles, I'm going to ask you the questions I asked after I read the council papers, so that's okay. I asked two questions earlier in the week. One was, by law, when does the mining site need to be rehabilitated and remediated? Would you mind explaining your answer, please?
Yep, sure. So at the moment, there is an environmental authority over the land which does require the rehabilitation of the land. The land is required to be returned to grazing conditions and the tailing ponds to be retained for ecological purposes, so for bird feeding, things like that. So the current EA conditions do not set out a time frame for the rehabilitation. So there's
no deadline time frame that any landowner needs to rehabilitate the land by?
At the current point in time, however, there will be a requirement for a transitional rehabilitation plan to be submitted. That the requirements of that rehabilitation plan are in a way influenced by the decision on this application, because the rehabilitation requirements would be varied in a way if the application were to be approved or refused, or a number of different outcomes that could come about. Depending on the outcome of this application, the applicant will be required to submit a progressive rehabilitation plan. That would be expected to be submitted by, I would say, the end of next year to the Department of Natural Resources and Mines. And over time, that will be assessed by the department, and it will include milestones and timeframes for that rehabilitation to occur. So because that document hasn't been submitted or been required to be submitted yet, we don't know by law when it will be required to be rehabilitated, but it will be scheduled in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wells. My second question is, especially noticed during the independent decision review panel, members of the community pointed out a number of things with the Mineral Resources Act. But I do note here that the Department of Natural Resources and Mines were contacted, but they didn't respond. So do NRME have an obligation to respond, and if so, what time frame?
Thank you for that. During the assessment process, the application was referred to the State Assessment Referral Agency. That's the formal process for acquiring, getting comments and conditions from the state government. We took an additional step by issuing correspondence to DNRME seeking third-party advice. That's a process where we seek advice, but there's no obligation to provide it or a time frame to provide it. Frequently, we request advice of that nature to entities nearby or affected potentially by an application that don't strictly have a jurisdiction under the referral agency process. So in that particular case, that was one where we sought their advice, but it wasn't necessary for them to respond or to a particular time frame.
Is that normal if you go to a state government department that they would not respond to a DA?
It has happened in the past. More often than not, we would receive a response. Occasionally, we would send a request to other entities such as Energex or Powerlink. They're probably a more frequent recipient of that sort of request. Occasionally, Department of Defence would be required to, or we would be sought for comments. More often than not, we will receive a response, and it may be a very simple letter saying that they have no issues, or explain to us some of their concerns that they may have and seek our attention in that matter. So more often than not, we would receive a response.
Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions of Mr Bowles? Yes, Councillor Conzelman.
The fact that the DNRME did not respond cannot be taken as an indication they have no issues, though, can it?
I wouldn't take it that way.
No.
The department have been helpful in providing us some correspondence and advice regarding the rehabilitation requirements. They have been having conversations with the applicant and the State Assessment Referral Agency with respect to how the mining lease may transition in the future. So that I wouldn't say that they're completely disregarding the scenario or the application. I think that they are contributing in a way that they see their jurisdiction allows, which would be the progressive rehabilitation plan. So I think, without wanting to put words in their mouth or make excuses for them, I think that they're satisfied that the existing legislation and the requirements under the Minerals Act to provide that progressive rehabilitation plan would cover their interests. But I'm not speaking for them on that behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Doyle, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr Bowles. Just back to the Mayor's first question around the rehabilitation plan. Are you able to give us any further information on the likely time periods? Now, I'm not asking on this specific matter, but if we look around Queensland, lots of old mining sites. Are there some precedents that we can look at that it will be single years, tens of years? What can the residents expect if it moves to that point?
I think it does depend a bit on the site itself, the level of earthworks that would have occurred during the mining operation. I think I would be able to find some information about other examples. The progressive rehabilitation requirements are up across the state, so that those timeframes, there would be similar examples. How well they relate to the particular requirements of this area would be a little bit hard to draw a bead on, because some of the requirements are fairly fairly slim in that the ponds, for example, aren't required to be completely filled or anything like that. They're retained for wild birds and water birds and things like that. So, but some of the other requirements, reprofiling the land for purposes of grazing, there may be some time that would take to do. There's quite a lot of expense and I suppose earthworks essentially required to do that. But to be honest, I'm not able to give you a time on
Sure.
this one, but I would be able to find examples if that would be of
No,
interest.
thank you. That would be of interest. And I think it's important as we take our residents on this journey of, I guess, education with our strategic approach around our city. So thanks.
Yep, no problems.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of Mr Bowles? Thank you,
Yeah,
Councillor
if I may, and you may not know the answer to this, but just curious as to whether the applicant or any of their associates were in attendance at any of the most recent court hearings that council has been involved in. Obviously, there's a landfilling component to this application, and I would have thought that it would be of particular interest that they could gain some insights from that. So just wondering if you have any awareness if the applicant or any of their proponents were in attendance.
I will answer, but I'll also just double check with my colleague Michael Simmons. No, that's the answer.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor, you have a question? Have you got your microphone on?
I've got to turn around to talk. I just want to understand. I'm happy to support the recycling and it's in a shed and everything. But what happens with what's left over? Where are we suggesting they take that?
So, if the outcome of the decision is that the recycling centre stays on that portion of the land, I would expect that within the next year or so, the department would start the process for the progressive rehabilitation plan, and the remaining land, which is the majority of the site, would go through the rehabilitation process. So that the land would retain in private ownership, so the current landowner would still own that, but they'll be required to carry out the rehabilitation requirements of the EA and the rehab plan.
I guess my question is, after they've sorted it, there'll probably be some waste left over. What will happen to that if they, are we not letting them keep it on their site, that rubbish, or what happens to what's left over?
It would have to go to another landfill.
So that's more trucks coming in and
potentially. There is a landfill directly adjoining the site. So, for example, if there was an arrangement with the operator of the tea tree facility, they would be able to take it there, which would reduce the vehicle trips. However, we aren't able to control that aspect of the commercial arrangements that they may have. So it is a potential outcome that the vehicles taking residual waste would be returned to the road network and to other facilities. That is a possibility.
I think Councillor Fechner, did you wish to ask other questions?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr Bowles? No, thank you very much, Mr Bowles.
Thank you very much.
I move recommendations A through to D. Do I have a seconder for that, Councillor Fechner? Thank you. In moving this, I'd like to speak to it. What has been presented to Council is a very thorough and detailed report on a development application for a proposed resource recovery and landfill facility at Ebenezer. In considering this application, it is Council's role to look at how it aligns with our community vision, existing directives, and of course Council's planning scheme. In particular, our community expects the highest standards of scrutiny of any new landfill proposal in Ipswich, and rightly so. It is our residents that wear the negative impacts of the waste industry. And in relation to this application, the community have made their views clear. There were 60 properly made submissions lodged, all objecting to the proposal, many of which highlighted the inconsistencies between the application and existing targets and positions of the State and Council. In December last year, this Council endorsed its Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive, setting out a forward-thinking and sustainable approach to the city's waste future. An approach that welcomes new operators who help solve the city's challenges of waste and resource recovery while moving away from our dependency on landfill. Importantly, the directive seeks to protect the residential amenity of our city. As Ipswich's population continues to grow, and we are Queensland's fastest growing city, it is no longer sustainable for Ipswich to be the site of choice for private landfill sites. The proposed facility would generate around 550,000 tonnes of waste per annum, and seeks approval for the establishment of yet another new landfill site in Ipswich. The landfill proposal raises environmental risks which have not been adequately addressed in this application. Specifically, the base of the proposed landfill will ultimately sit below the groundwater table, which elevates the potential of harmful substances seeping through the base liner. My view is that approving a new landfill in Ipswich is not in the interests of council, the community or our environment. It is certainly not consistent with the council's Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive, nor its principles. Furthermore, the proposal has failed to demonstrate any need for a new landfill site. There is no shortage of existing and lawful landfill sites in Ipswich which could accommodate this waste, including the neighbouring Veolia's Tea Tree Bioenergy facility, which adjoins the proposed site. Approving a new landfill would be against the recommendations provided by both our council officers and the independent technical experts who formed the independent decision review panel to review the proposal. My intention this meeting is to support the recommendations provided in this report, which appropriately conditions the parts of the proposal that are consistent with our planning scheme and waste directive and refuses the parts that are not. In doing so, I'd like to thank the community members who gave their time to provide submissions and articulate their concerns, and who articulated their concerns exceptionally well, and they did so well throughout this process. I'll open the matter up for further discussion. If there's no other discussion, I'll put the Councillor Madsen.
I just reiterate what you said. I thought the independent decision review panel was a very interesting evening. It was good to see the community get up and speak on an equal footing. I think that's a good innovation for council and an important mechanism moving forward. There's been a lot of community feedback the whole way through on this particular application, and it's good that they had that opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Madsen. Councillor Milligan?
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with all of your remarks and support in full everything that you have stated, and thank you for the additional detailing to community through this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Kunzelman?
I particularly want to thank those community members who have been so persistent in this, in their advocacy for this advocacy against this particular development. And I think we realise that they have intergenerational objectives in mind. They have front of mind that this is something for the future, that we need to continue, and that it is consistent with our waste directive as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Councillor Johnny?
Thank you, Chair. So in the past and at present in South East Queensland, waste follows the path of least cost, and now this council, I don't believe, think that this is acceptable moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Johnny. Councillor Tully?
Thanks, Mayor. I have an amendment to propose which I've provided to the committee clerk, if that's able to be shown, and then I will read it when it's visible for the purposes of anyone watching.
Okay, so Councillor, you wish to change C, D and add an E, is that correct?
I'll read it.
Okay.
I'll move that paragraphs C and D be deleted and replaced with, and it's paragraphs C, D and E, which I'll read, that paragraph C to read that council approve in part development application number 10674/2019/CA, being the material change of use for waste activity use involving landfill for the reasons as contained in paragraph E, subject to conditions to be prepared by relevant officers and approved by council by resolution. D, that council approve in part development application number 10674/2019/CA, being the material change of use for waste activity use involving rehabilitating a mining void for the reasons contained in paragraph E, subject to conditions to be prepared by relevant officers and approved by council by resolution. E, the reasons for the approvals contained in paragraphs C and D are that the proposed development incorporates and demonstrates A, one integrated facility on site utilising current and appropriate technologies, B, promotion of resource recovery based on current and evolving industry standards, C, the ultimate enhancement of the natural environment for future generations, including rehabilitation of the site for future land users, D, the desirability of a co-located facility, improving environmental outcomes and reducing undesirable additional vehicular movements with on-site landfill utilising only on-site produced recycling residue. E, the desirability of filling a mining void on-site with residual waste generated on-site. F, enhanced economic and employment outcomes for such multiple use site. G, improved and ultimate visual amenity of the site and the general amenity of the area. And H, consistency with the aims of the state government following the appointment of Queensland's first Mine Rehabilitation Commissioner on the 10th of September 2021.
So, Councillor Tully, that's, I'd say, wouldn't be a variation. That substantially changes what is being looked at. And as the mover, I don't agree to that amendment. So, do you wish to move that as a foreshadowed motion?
No, I'll move that as an amendment to substitute those two paragraphs.
Okay. Do we have anyone to second that amendment?
I'll second that for the point of discussion.
Okay. So, Councillor Donning has seconded that amendment for discussion?
Yes. I'll just make a few brief comments because those 8 paragraphs incorporate the key issues which I see as a community moving forward. And the issue arises about our environmental outcomes. This is different from just a landfill site. This is a proposed co-located facility rather than just one landfill after another. And it's a new opportunity and perhaps a new model that could be encouraged. We need to recall that any applicant has the right of appeal to the Planning and Environment Court, as do formal objectors. And perhaps this is an opportunity to recognise that a model of this nature, where the residue being produced from a recycling operation can be co-located on site, as opposed to what we've just heard. The intention would be that that would be trucked and there'd be more truck movements between this recycling facility and other sites. That's something that I certainly wouldn't want to see, and I think a lot of people in the community wouldn't want to see more truck movements simply as a result of an approval for the recycling facility, given the amount of residue. Hopefully reducing, but it's not possible under current technologies to reduce it to zero. So we'd be creating a situation whereby under the approval, the residue would have to be trucked off-site rather than being dealt with on-site. With the appointment of the Mine Rehabilitation Commissioner, that's a significant step forward, not just for Ipswich, but for our entire Queensland community. I think now we welcome that opportunity that the government has provided in the last few days. As I say, the Commissioner would be able to work with us, with the owner of the site, to produce the on-site co-location. As I say, I see this quite different from other matters that have come before Council, other matters that are being proposed, because this is a new, unique opportunity which can be conditioned, obviously. We can put conditions on the development of the site for the use of the landfill in relation to the amount of landfill, the timing of the landfill, and how it actually operates. But the key thing I see is it's an opportunity to encourage location. If we want to say that we don't want more landfills in the city, those voids are there. We need some process to be able to utilise them. I see this as a wonderful opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. Not because they're producing the residue, they're producing the residue from the recycling facility simply because that is the modern technology. But to suggest with the refusal that needs to be trucked elsewhere in the city, that is just adding to the number of truck movements rather than reducing them. And hopefully as I say, this is a golden opportunity to work with the new Mine Rehabilitation Commissioner to get an outcome that's good for the use of this co-located site.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. So just to be clear that you're recommending that Council ignore the advice from the council officers and the independent decision review panel, and you're wanting to proceed with a brand new landfill site in Ipswich alongside the recycling facility.
No, I'm not saying they ignore it. I've moved what I've moved and the wording speaks for itself.
Thank you, Councillor. Open up for further discussion on that, to make that amendment, not on the, I guess, the issue itself, but on the amendment.
Oh, I just wanted to ask a question. Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
So I don't want more truck movements out there going through the Amberley interchange, but how would you get a percentage of what's going to be the residue that, you know, to stop them from just bringing in landfill?
The way in which this has been incorporated, I've understood that this wouldn't be a standalone landfill, that it would be a co-located facility as an adjunct to the recycling facility. So with that limitation on it, that would mean that any of the residue that would be produced from the recycling facility would have to be disposed of on site. That by itself, if it was conditioned in that way, would ensure that there were no additional truck movements caused by the movement of residue from the recycling to other landfills around the city. So it would be a landfill on-site utilised only for on-site creation of material that's produced as the residue of the recycling process.
Thank you. I think I see two other hands up. Councillor Fechner?
Would we be able to bring an officer to the lectern to answer any potential questions? Just have some pertaining to some technical questions. Yep.
Will that be Mr Bowles? Over to you, Councillor Fechner.
Mr Bowles, obviously, my concern here is the compliance, or if we were to proceed with the amendment here. How is that measured as in terms of residual recycling waste, and could that easily be circumvented by trucking waste into a site, determining that an entire truckload, for instance, isn't able to be recycled and then it ends up in the landfill anyway? I mean, the definition around residual waste, and I thought maybe a few of these discussions may have occurred during the process of the application.
Thank you for the question, through the Chair. So there are a few points to unpack there. So compliance is a difficulty in the landfill space for a number of reasons. That is compliance with conditions set out by the state that have an impact on the environment, particularly in the leachate management space. But compliance in relation to the operation of a facility has been a challenge for us, Council, and for the state as well. So a good example would be the resource recovery area efforts that we've had in a number of our landfills. Some have been effective and well controlled, such that recyclable material is deposited on the site, processed in a fast and efficient manner, and the residual is deposited. However, that isn't the standard across the board. There are circumstances where waste deposited on site for the purposes of resource recovery remains on the site for a long time, up to 12 months, or is continually deposited at a rate that is faster than has been screened and dealt with. So there are some difficulties in monitoring that. The prevailing train of thought, particularly from the state government, is that conditions are applied and the assumption is on compliance with conditions rather than the assumption that things will go bad. However, we have a fairly long history of non-compliance and difficulties in retaining compliance with conditions on a wealth of issues, really, quite a variety of different issues. So compliance will be a challenge with respect to management of the recycled material standing on site. We may be able to apply conditions, but how well they'll stand up would be a matter for time to show, really.
Have those discussions already occurred with the applicant in terms of their view on the end result or the intent of their application? Have they ever indicated whether they would concede to condition it in such a way?
The conversations with the applicant, I believe, have been focused on the proposal as it is, which is a landfill that is open to people to deposit waste there, as well as for them to recycle waste. The restriction on who can use the landfill, so for example, the operator to only use the landfill for their waste or the residual, that hasn't really been part of the conversation. To be truthful, conversations about the arrangement of the use that exclude external waste arriving on site to be deposited draws up concerns about the viability of the project as a whole. So I would say that if we were to say to the applicant, we would like to change the proposal so that only the waste, residual waste from your facility is deposited here, I would say that there would be some concern from the applicant, but we haven't had that conversation.
And in the report, there seemed to be a timing inconsistency with the development of the recycling facility versus the immediate operation of the landfill as it stands. So the landfill, if I'm understanding correctly, would be operational before the recycling facility were to be up and running?
I believe that's the case. The recycling facility will ramp up over time and its capabilities will ramp up. But once the landfill is constructed, you know, it also ramps up, but at the same time, you could construct that quite easily, or some components of it fairly easily. Likewise, the recycling facility is really just a big shed on the land. So if we were to change the arrangement, I think you could set an arrangement where the recycling facility comes first. So the order of recycling facility, landfill could be set out, and that is an uncommon arrangement where we define the order of uses occurring.
And we're not allowed to condition the sophistication levels of the technology that's used within the facility, is that correct?
There would be a limit to how reasonable we would be able to do that. I don't know how, we could, whether it would stand up in court or those conditions are fatal if those technologies aren't available to the operator. If the court were to find, say for example, that a target that we've set is unreasonable because of the availability of technology or machinery wasn't there, that could be a challenge. We could try, but I would question how much length that condition would have.
And throughout the report, 45% was the recycling target. Yeah, I mean, I think that number speaks for itself. And was that considered an ambitious target when we were considering the application?
That is a target that is consistent with similar facilities or similar proposals. I wouldn't say necessarily ambitious. I think they have spoken to us of possibilities reaching to 90%. That would be ambitious. If the original opening date they were aiming for 90%, I would call that ambitious. I wouldn't call 45% ambitious.
Yeah, and just to confirm, so you've had conversations with the applicant with regards to having the landfill open to operators other than themselves, and that being an important part of the economical viability of the facility. And if in a condition we were to say that it was their own, that wouldn't necessarily be in alignment with the views during the entire application process.
That's right. That hasn't been the conversation we've been having with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles.
I think Councillor Doyle, you have some questions?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Mr Bowles has largely answered the question I was going to raise, which was off the back of Councillor Tully's comment around Council's ability to condition development approvals. We've done that in the past and it's been an epic failure in my personal view. So I was wondering what was so different or unique about this one that, you know, we could improve our opportunities to condition it for good outcomes for our residents. So I'm satisfied with your response so far.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Johnick?
Just with a question of to Councillor Tully's amendment of only the recycling residual going to landfill, then looking at the feedback about the landfill site not being properly lined and the possibility of contaminants still leaching through because the base of the liner will be under like the groundwater level. So that still is, in my opinion, not reducing environmental impacts. Is that correct?
That would be my view. Yeah. So if we were to retain the current landfill shape and design, but restrict the waste, we would still have issues with respect to potential contamination of groundwater.
Because it would still be, even though it's still residual, it would still be going down too low and touching with groundwater and the possibility of contamination and leachate.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fichtner.
I'm particularly concerned with what the definition of residual recycling might actually be, and at whose discretion would that be in terms of a compliance outcome that we might expect if an officer were to be on site and see an entire truck being diverted to landfill instead of being sorted. Is that at the discretion of the operator, or is there some level of reach that a compliance officer might have to dispute a particular load that might be going into the site?
I think the simplest way to manage that would be monitoring of truck vehicle tonnage, tonnage entering the site and leaving the site, the specific components of every vehicle tray and what it may have in. That would create difficulties for compliance in terms of manpower required to test that. So it would have to be based on a tonnage rate.
Yeah, and you could extrapolate the percentage that was being recycled versus heading to landfill.
That's correct.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Are there any other questions of Mr Bowles? Councillor Milligan?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Bowles, with respect to the proposed amendment, from a technical perspective, stated in simplistic terms, would the amendment be approving a landfill site that just happens to have a recycling facility on site?
It would be predominantly a landfill use. It would have the recycling centre component. It needs to be reminded that there is a component that can be recycled, but there's also putrescible waste and things like that in the landfill as it is at the moment that would be a concern. Amending it so that it is only the residual waste would take out the components of the putrescible waste. So it would still be a landfill. It would still function and look like a landfill, but the components of the residual waste would be different to what's currently proposed. But fundamentally, it would be a landfill with a recycling component.
And then that would be subject to whether the conditioning could be enforced?
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Fichtner.
Sorry, and this is my last question, but
Ask as many as you want, Councillor Fichtner.
understanding the data that was provided by the applicant with the 45% recycling target, we're probably correct in our view that 55% non-recycling is more than half. So yes, that it would be majority a landfill versus a recycling facility.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No other questions. Thank you very much, Mr Bowles.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other discussion on the matter? In that case, I'll hand over to Councillor Tully for a right of reply before we go to a vote.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. Councillor Fichtner raised the issue of the residual waste and what is it. Clearly the proposed amendment, which doesn't specify the final conditions which would need to be prepared and drafted and approved by Council, clearly it relates to the residual waste coming from the process, that it's not going to be a situation where it's just a landfill site. It would have to be part of the process. What Mr Bowles said was that it couldn't incorporate putrescible waste, that it's got to be, would have to be, in my opinion, and I understood this from the application, but in any event, under the terms and conditions that we could impose, that it has to be the residual waste from the recycling process and not from any other means. Now, under planning law in Queensland and many other jurisdictions, any condition which is imposed by a local government has to meet two tests. One's reasonable and relevant. And it has to be reasonable in the circumstances, and I believe that that could include the technologies which are used in relation to a process. We in my time, I've never seen any development application in this city approved without conditions. I've seen one in the former Moreton Shire Council over some years ago, where it was just a one-line approval with no conditions, but councillors would be very familiar with the process that any development application is conditioned, and the council is responsible for enforcing conditions. I think the clear intention of this is that the process involves the residue and not just trucks coming in and electing to dump there. The other key issue, of course, is the issue of additional lack of environmental outcomes with trucks moving from the site with the residue, which is what would have to happen initially with 55% of the waste. And in relation to the filling of the void, obviously that could and would be conditioned as well. The issue of the water table is important. That doesn't mean that the council's going to approve any sort of waste going in below the water table line. If it was suggested that that void could never be used for a landfill of any description, including one that was co-located, that would mean that it would never occur, simply because it's below the water level. And the issue that has been raised by Councillor Johnnick is certainly true. That needs to be properly conditioned if the amendment were to be accepted. And the co-location, which I'll just finish on this note, I think this is a new model, if properly conditioned, would lead to a much better environmental outcome for the entire use of the site, and be better off in the community. Either way, I guess if the amendment is not accepted, this matter obviously can end up in the Planning and Environment Court, either through the developer or through the objectors, and it's a model which I believe we could and should encourage across the city, and that is recycling. That is, to me, is the aim of what should be happening. Recycling waste, that's an encouragement that we should give rather than try to reduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tully. I now put the amendment itself to the vote. Those in favour? There's one vote. Councillor Tully. Those against, please raise your hand. Myself, Councillor Madsen, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Johnnick, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Fechner, Councillor Milligan and Councillor Kunzelman vote against and no abstaining. Thank you. So we go back to the original motion.
Just a point of order, Mr Mayor. Could I ask that each of the 4 paragraphs be put individually as the components of the motion, please?
No, I will move it as it is. Thank you. So with the 4 recommendations there, would anyone like to have any further discussion on those 4 points of the original motion? Councillor Fechner?
Yes, I support the recommendations as they stand. I think it's important to continue to investigate recycling opportunities within the LGA. Therefore, I support the recycling facility. I do not support, as per the recommendation, the establishment of a new landfill in Ipswich for a whole host of reasons, which I won't go into every single one of them. But let's look at our history of compliance and the obstacles we face when it comes to, assessing these sites for their level of compliance. We've got a history of it being so poor in Ipswich. Was there anything, how can we be assured that that won't continue to happen? I note here that whilst it may be convenient for the operator to collate and get rid of the waste on their own site, there is adequate supply of landfill airspace in Ipswich in South East Queensland. There's no established need for a brand new landfill here. So I support the recycling element of this. I absolutely support the fact that we will refuse a new landfill within our local government area. We spoke earlier today about the $6.4 million that Council has approved for potential legal costs when it comes to fighting landfill operators who aren't doing the right thing. It seems absolutely absurd to me that we would be supporting the operation or the establishment of a new landfill. To Councillor Tully's point, this might end up in the Planning and Environment Court. I hope not. I sincerely hope that Wanless do not object to this because there is no established need for a new landfill, and if they truly want to embrace the circular economy, they will forge ahead with their waste facility, and I wish them luck on that, if that's the case.
Thank you, Councillor Fechner. Any other points of discussion? Councillor Ireland?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I just want to state that I'm really concerned about trucks in and out on Champions Way and on our highway. The Amberley interchange, for me, there's so much happening out there. I don't want to see them coming in, coming out, coming back. Like to get rid of waste. I just would like it to, I guess, be contained on site. But I understand what we're saying, that, you know, if they build their recycling first, and we'll see what's left after that. But traffic's always an issue out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madsen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to repeat what other councillors have said so far for the sake of brevity, but for me, I have faith in the original officer's recommendations that we're now discussing. That was clear from some of the great questions asked by fellow councillors of Mr. Bowles, and his answers. It was as clear to me after his answers as it was walking in here today that it is a justified position that's been put forward before us, and I think it's a position that is in harmony with what the community expects.
Thank you, Councillor Mads. It's good to hear from both of you since this is in Division 1. Thank you. If there's no other comment, Councillor Wiggin.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect to the recommendations, they have been developed and provided based on sound principles of assessment and alongside other independent review. I thank council's officers and managers for going through the detailed process to deliver what I believe is the correct recommendations with regard to this application.
Thank you. There being no other discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour of recommendations A through to D, please raise your hand. I'll look around the room. It's myself, Councillor Madsen, Councillor Ireland, Councillor Johnnick, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Fechner, Councillor Milligan, Councillor Kunzelmann. Those against? There's no one against. Those abstaining? Councillor Tuller is marked as an abstention, which obviously is marked as a negative. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 16.1. (16.1) is a notice of motion from Councillor Ireland. Would you like to move your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I move the Council follow the 2019 final determination of the electoral arrangement and divisional boundary review to conduct a mid-term review in 2022 to gauge residents' experiences and satisfaction with the multi-member arrangement and divisional boundaries.
Thank you. Just before I go to a seconder, Council, I just want to do a correction there. That 2019 final determination wasn't that Council do a mid-term review. I'll just read it out. The recommendation is that, and I'll quote, "Given the unique situation in Ipswich and the significance of the changes being recommended by this review, the Change Commission recommends the Minister consider directing the Ipswich City Council in consultation with the Change Commission to conduct a mid-term review and community consultation in 2022 to gauge residents' experiences and satisfaction with the multi-member arrangements and divisional boundaries." So I don't know if you're open to changing that motion to, because it states something that is a fact that is not a fact.
I'm happy if you want to change that.
Mayor, could I suggest that we could achieve that outcome by deleting the words from delete these words, follow the 2019 through to the word boundary review 2. So it'd boundary review 2. So it would read that Council conduct a mid-term review, which I think would be not inconsistent with the original determination.
Okay, so that Council conduct. Is that where we're going? Okay. That Council conduct a divisional boundary review. No, that Council... A mid-term review, okay. Okay. All right, I could live with that.
Thank you. So that is, would you like to repeat your motion then, councillor Ireland?
That council conduct a mid-term review in 2022 to gauge residents' experiences and satisfaction with the multi-member arrangement and divisional boundaries.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yep, I'll second
Yep, councillor Manson. Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to council officer on this, or are you happy to go straight into discussion? Councillor?
Well, it's just a motion.
Would you like to speak to it?
Some, yeah, I'll speak to it. Thank you. First of all, I think it's self-explanatory that it has to be done before 2023 anyway when it goes to the Change Commission. This is an important issue for the city moving forward. Division 1 is approximately 2.5 times it's 55% of the land mass of the LGA, and it's also the state government is looking at increasing their members' seat to 93, or increasing from 93 seats. I might have that wrong, but they're looking at increasing their seats in Parliament, and Ipswich is the fastest growing city in Queensland, so I think we need to ensure that our representation keeps pace with development. So I'm suggesting that we look at either 5 multi-member divisions or 10 individual divisions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would the seconder like to speak to it as well?
I'll just speak in support of Councillor Ireland raising this morning. I have no issues sharing a division with her. I think we work together pretty well. I'm unsure if the minister's going to do the review or not, but at any opportunity, I think the community should be engaged to see if it's working for them. What do the residents think? That's what I want to know. I'm up for other people to suggest whether or not we wait for the minister to make a decision or not. But yeah, I think any information that can be gathered about residents' experiences through a proper process, I'd be more than willing to read. I do tend to agree that increasing the number of councillors back towards 10 maybe something that's viable. I've yet to see an actual explanation for why there was a reduction. Less representation shouldn't be an objective. And it occurred in Ipswich. It went from 11 to 9. I want to see as many voices as possible speaking for the community, like within reason, because that diversity of ideas and discussion helps us make better decisions for the city. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Thank you. Councillor Tully.
Yeah, I'd endorse the remarks of the two councillors. We are the only city in Queensland that has multi-member divisions, and that needs to be looked at, and they are huge divisions, bigger than a state electorate in numbers, even though there are 2 councillors representing them. Councillor Ireland raises the issue of the speculation or the report this week that the state government is looking at increasing the number of parliamentarians. I can't recall any case in Queensland in a council area that was growing where the number of councillors was reduced. I think this is an opportunity for feedback from the community, both in relation to the number of councillors and the methodology of election which was put into Ipswich. For the 2020 election. I think it's appropriate that we analyse this, and I guess the opportunity is still there for the minister to require something similar or identical.
Thank you. I think, Acting CEO, did you wish to add something?
Thank you, Chair. Just for the council's consideration, from a process perspective, the council could conduct the review but wouldn't then have any authority to take any action as a result of the review. The review could, of course, inform advocacy or a letter to the responsible minister to then provide the direction to the Change Commission. But an alternative approach now could be to write, if it is the will of the council, to write to the responsible minister to provide advocacy for a review and the grounds that the council believes exist for the review for consideration.
Thank you, Acting CEO. Based on that, I think, Councillor, would you consider making an amendment, or I'd like to propose an amendment that council write to the minister requesting a mid-term review, and the same as the rest of the recommendation. Would that be an acceptable amendment to you, Councillor Island?
Thank you, Mayor. It achieves what I'm trying to do, is to get the councillors to think about what's going to happen in 2024, because for Division 1 we don't have a base, and we can't be at Redbank Plains and out at Mount Mort, so Division 1 is just too big for us to actually service our residents the way that the other 3 divisions are able to in smaller areas.
Thank you. Councillor Madsen, would you be open to that amendment?
I'm in support of that amendment.
Okay. So the amendment is before us is that council write to the minister requesting a mid-term review in 2022 to gauge residents' experience and satisfaction with the multi-member arrangements and divisional boundaries. I'll open that back up for discussion. Councillor Kornzman.
Is that proposed in addition to the gauging the residents' experiences?
That's what it says in there.
Additional. That's additional, is it?
That's what's in the motion. And that was what was the recommendation of the Change Commission.
Okay, so do we want the minister to gauge the residents' experiences?
So I've got to have the floor. It's just in line with the Change Commission recommendation, and in that it states that the minister, I'll just read it out. The Change Commission recommends the minister consider directing the council to do this work, so it's just in line with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Tully?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just trying to clarify that it's intended to replace the existing proposed motion. Is that
yes,
right?
and the move of the second to agree.
And that council wouldn't take any action under that, under the variation.
Well, the council would take action and would write to the minister.
Well, yeah, no, but wouldn't take any action in dealing with residents until the minister came back to us.
Well, we would chase up with the minister on that.
No, the point I'm making is the original motion intended for council to gauge residents' views.
I understand, Councillor, but the
so
mover...
I'm just trying to understand what the intention is, that we would write to them, if this were substituted and carried, we would write to the minister and asking that, follow it up if necessary, but not take any action in seeking a resident's views until the minister had taken action to request us.
That is on the motion. That's the motion on the floor.
Clarify.
And I guess to the point, the fact that we could very well do our own consultation, but the minister or the Change Commission is under no obligation to take it on board. If we do this process, I think be proactive. That way it'll have teeth, if I can use the word that you use, Acting CEO. So that's before us. For my perspective in going around across the whole city, I note that based in 2016, each of the councillors, based on the number of councillors then, had about 19,000 residents that they represented. In our current situation, each division has about 57,000 residents, so that's 3 times the number of residents as previously. And it's my experience too, when I go around to different community group meetings and so on, that most of them, they all expect both councils to attend. It's not like, I think, and the intention was to divide and, work as a team, which they do. But that's not, everywhere I go, people expect both councillors. So I do acknowledge the hard work by all the councils sitting around here, that you do have 3 times the number of residents to represent and fewer staff. And different, the Local Government Act has changed, so there were more restrictions. So I will support that this council do write to the minister requesting a mid-term review. I think it would be really important to gauge residents' experiences. Notably, I think my experience has been that residents' main concern is having ethical and quality leadership. I also note that most residents don't want more politicians representing them. So I think it'll be a good experience for us to do. Any other discussion? on this? I'll put Councillor as the mover. Do you wish to make any other comments before we go to a vote?
No, that will be suitable, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And it's unanimous and carried. Thank you very much. Item 17 is questions on notice. There are none, so I will close the meeting at 10:58. Thank you very much.